Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Across Southeast Alaska on the Frontier Media Network, KINY Juneau, Una, Haines, Skagway, and Goon in KIFW Sitka, and KTKN Ketchikan, Wrangell, Prince of Wales. A special News of the North, the Congressional Candidates Forum, with Nick Begich, Sarah Palin, and Mary Peltola, with your hosts, News of the North, Kevin Allen, and Greg Knight. Thanks to the Juneau and Sitka Chambers of Commerce.
Thanks to the Greater Juneau Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Sitka Chamber of Commerce, and Southeast Conference.
Good afternoon and welcome to News of the North Special Election 2022 Candidate Forum, featuring Nick Begich, Sarah Palin, and Mary Peltola. This forum should last more than an hour, and it's being broadcast live from the capital city of Juneau. I'm Greg Knight, and we're joined by the candidates in the Alaska Airlines studio at KINY. This forum is sponsored by the Greater Juneau Chamber of Commerce, the Sitka Chamber of Commerce, and Southeast Conference. Kevin?
Thanks, Greg. There will be 3 sections to this forum. First, each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves to listeners. Following the introductions, we will move to individual questions and answers on a variety of topics important to voters in Southeast Alaska. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the questions. Each of the candidates received basic subject matters related to the questions before the forum. After the individual question and answer period, we will move into a face-to-face segment where each candidate will be able to ask another candidate a question. The candidates will have 1 minute to respond. After the face-to-face round, candidates will have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Candidates, are you ready?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, candidates, you now have 2 minutes to introduce yourself to voters. We'll begin in alphabetical order, so that means Nick Begich, followed by Sarah Palin and Mary Peltola. Mr. Begich.
Well, my name is Nick Begich. I am from the state of Alaska, as many folks would guess. My parents split up when I was young, and I was raised outside in what I like to call the free state of Florida by my grandparents on my mom's side. And there's a lot of interesting dynamics in my family, as people could imagine. My grandparents on that side turns out are solid conservative Republicans from Southeast Missouri, and was raised in the church, K through 12 Christian school, ended up at Baylor University and got a business degree with a focus in entrepreneurship. Following that, worked in investor relations for a publicly traded company, and eventually made my way up a little further north to Indiana University, where I picked up an MBA with a focus in information technology and decision sciences, which is sort of risk analytics and forecasting. Went to Ford Motor Company following that, working in the Dearborn, Michigan area, and worked as a technology manager, and interestingly enough, worked on the car group side, helping to develop minivans. Interestingly enough, we decided, my wife and I, that there were better places to live in the country, and decided to give Alaska a shot, thinking we'd be here for 2 years. That was about 20 years ago. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm a conservative. I'm a small business owner. I've got a business that writes custom software for mostly startups around the United States. I've been involved with the Alaska Republican Party, was the co-chair for Congressman Don Young in 2020, and the former board president of the Alaska Policy Forum. And, it's my contention that we've got to make a solid business case for the state of Alaska down in D.C. I intend to do that as someone who's come from the private sector and invested my career there. I believe we need a private sector perspective on our behalf in D.C.
Thank you very much, Mr. Begich. Ms. Palin.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate this forum. I appreciate your hospitality also. I really enjoy being back here, and my roots that are strong and deep in Southeast Alaska mean a lot to me. I think they provide a good perspective for me on issues facing Alaska, especially those in Southeast Alaska. You all in this part of the state deserving a lot more attention, I think, than some in the larger city of Anchorage seem to want to give Southeast Alaska sometimes. My early childhood was spent here. My dad and mom moving up here to teach school and coach in Skagway, and my dad working on the railroad. The roots here that I get to enjoy as I return, have returned often to hike the Chilkoot Trail and participate in that endurance relay, the Klondike Road Race, and do those wonderful things that Southeast Alaska provides. And of course, having lived here as governor, I recognize what is needed in these parts. And as my intention, being your congresswoman, is to represent the entire state of Alaska. Having been from Southeast Alaska, I think that's going to be a valuable connection to the people, the hardworking families who live here, what I'll be able to accomplish in Congress. I'll be able to just hit the ground running, the connections that I have throughout the United States, those whom we need to support Alaska's industry, Alaska's development. I'm going to put that all to good use for the people of Southeast, for the people all over Alaska. But again, just having a great appreciation for these parts and, recognizing the warm hospitality that you all have provided us. I think it reflects well on the people who live here, and it bodes well for all of Southeast Alaska. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Palin. Ms. Peltola.
Thank you, Rick. I am Mary Peltola. I am from Alaska originally. My dad came up here from Nebraska, and he taught school in Fort Yukon, actually with Don Young in the late 60s. He moved to Bethel to help put a hardline phone in every village. He met my mom. She's from the Bethel region, from Queethlook, but he also worked down here as a staffer for many years in the legislature. So when I was before I was even in kindergarten, we came down here. We, of course, stayed at the Baranoff. And so I have a long history with Juneau as well. I was in the state legislature for 10 years. And 2 years before that, I was an intern and then a reporter. I worked a couple years as a lobbyist after I got out of the legislature. I am pro-fish, pro-jobs, pro-family, and pro-choice. I have 7 kids of my own. 4 are my own, 3 are stepkids, and then I've got 2 grandkids. My kids are ages 14 to 25. I work in a really nonpartisan way, although I am running as a Democrat. I help put back together the Bush Caucus, which was made up of non-road system legislators. There were 10 of us, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans. I grew up commercial fishing and tendering. That's my what I consider my real background is in fisheries. I believe Alaskans are a diverse people with a common future, and I would love to work for all Alaskans.
Thank you very much, Ms. Peltola.
And yes, thank you for the introduction, candidates. We will now get into the main part of the forum as each of the candidates answer questions posed to them. The questions are posed at random and in no particular order. Are you ready, candidates?
Yes.
Let's begin.
Okay. Candidates, what is the biggest single issue facing Alaska? And what would you do about it? We'll begin with Sarah Palin, followed by Nick Begich and Mary Peltola.
Okay, without question, it's the rising cost of everything in Alaska. It's inflation. It's the rising cost of energy, especially. And the irony, of course, is that Alaska is key. We're instrumental in fixing the problem. All you got to do is turn on the spigot here in Alaska for the federal government to get out of our way and allow primacy, allow the development that we do most responsibly, most ethically, and with, I believe, the least amount of corruption in a state government, that we need to be allowed to develop our God-given natural resources. And that way we secure the rest of the United States. But first and foremost, we create jobs for Alaskans. We are able then to reduce prices of everything because, of course, energy affects every aspect of our lives. There's that inherent link between energy and security, energy and prosperity. And once we're allowed to access and develop responsibly our God-given resources, then we start finding the solutions to the people who are so concerned about putting food on the table, paying their rent, paying their mortgage. It amazes me all across the nation. We're hearing this, but especially in Alaska because of transportation costs. All throughout Alaska, people are extremely concerned about the rising costs. They don't see a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. And yet, I know what the light is at the end of the tunnel. It's let's have some representation back there in Washington, D.C., where people start understanding what Alaska's issues are and understanding what Alaska's opportunities are to help prosperity for the rest of the U.S., but to secure our own state by developing our resources. That's how we're going to bring down prices.
Thank you very much. Nick Begich.
So it turns out that Alaska is the second most federally dependent state in the country. This has actually become a major threat as we see rising deficit spending and a growing national debt, that we're so reliant on receipts from the federal government. We have got to do more to diversify Alaska's economy, and that begins and ends with resources. We're a resource state. Whether it be oil or gas or precious metals or base metals, critical minerals, rare earth elements that we have down here in Southeast, whether it be fishing and our tremendous fisheries, world-class fisheries, or timber. We have got to add more legs to the stool for the state of Alaska in order to make sure that we are prosperous, that we have the ability to create the generational wealth that Alaska does have the potential to create. We've got to have a strong voice in the Congress in order to advance these priorities. Somebody who can work not just with one side of the aisle, but with both sides of the aisle to make that business case for our state. Why should we be developing these resources here in Alaska and not somewhere else? And often I cite the example of the Congo, where about 70% of the world's cobalt originates. This is a place in which there's very little environmental framework observed. There's child labor used on a regular basis there. We can do better, and we do better here in the state of Alaska. We've got to do more to open up the state, to create that continuous set of opportunities, not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come.
Mr. Begich, thank you. Mary Peltola.
Without a doubt, I think the biggest issue affecting every household in Alaska is inflation. Inflation has been the thief in the night for years, and certainly inflation is making out like a bandit right now. The floor on inflation is really 9%. We often hear folks attributing 9% across the board, but that's just the floor. We see automobiles and other things now going 30% higher. So this is crippling for folks who don't have a ton of discretionary income anyway because of what we're paying for home heating costs. So I think that inflation is the critical issue. And luckily, in the last few days, last week, we are seeing some traction in DC with the Inflation Reduction Act. It hasn't passed yet, but there are provisions in there that are encouraging an ability to negotiate for Medicare to negotiate with pharmaceuticals, to restrict future price increases and capping out-of-pocket expenses for seniors at $2,000, making sure pharmaceutical companies pay their fair share of record profits. I think another thing that we're seeing with this inflation is big corporations trying to recuperate profits that were lost during the pandemic. And I get it, we're all suffering after the pandemic, but I don't really think it's appropriate for big corporations to price gouge at the expense of Alaskans. And we've got to institute penalties on corporations that are jacking up prices while earning record profits, and then return that back to Alaskans and across the board, all Americans. Lastly, we've got to increase the minimum wage and index it to the cost of living in Alaska so Alaskan families can afford their basic cost of living.
Thank you very much.
Candidates, the term you're being voted in for is 2 months long, and then you must face a general election. If you're not successful in this race, will you stand again in the general election? We'll begin with Mary Peltola, followed by Sarah Palin, and then Nick Begich. Mary?
Absolutely. I think all of us are really in this race for the 2-year seat. And in order to be a contender in that race, we really had to show that we could ramp up and on a moment's notice for this special election. But myself, of course, I have no interest in being a congressman for that short of a period. Of course, in a state like Alaska with one congressman, you've got to have somebody who intends to build up seniority, which I do. Yes.
Am I next?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yes. I did. I signed up for the long haul here. That is, I think that's all of our intention. What a dynamic, though, that we're dealing with this special election, along with now the ranked choice voting, the voting system that's been adopted that is so frustrating for so many Alaskans because it's convoluted and it's complicated. And I think it really will result in some voter suppression, unfortunately, because a lot of people I talked to, they're just kind of throwing up their hands going, the system, it wasn't broke. Why'd they try to fix something? And it seems so, as I say, complicated and convoluted that too many people are saying, I don't even want any part of this until lawmakers change or until the voters are allowed to change the system back to within our republic, exercising democracy, a winner take all vote, a simple process that absolutely will reflect the will of the people. So we've got these strange dynamics going on. And I hear concerns expressed all across the state about this new voting system where actually you could be, say, the most popular, in a way of saying the most popular candidate, and you could actually not win the thing. You could actually come in third. The third place vote getter on the surface could actually win this thing. And again, it's complicated, and that's unfortunate. I think we just need to keep the system simple and fair, and that is a cornerstone of a democracy within a republic is fair elections and not a complicated system.
Thank you, Ms. Palin. Mr. Begich.
Well, yes, definitely. I intend to remain in this race. I got in October of last year, and have now been in the race for whatever that is, 9 months, 10 months, and we'll just keep going. Every single day, we're out meeting more Alaskans. That's been the intent of the campaign from the get-go, is to hear from you. And we've traveled the state, throughout the state, and met tens of thousands of people. And it's been my pleasure to come down to Southeast so many times. We've been in Haines, we've been in Sitka, we've been in Juneau many, many times, we've been in Ketchikan many times. And so, we'll continue to travel the state, meet the people where they are. And I think the point that was made earlier, I think by Mary, was, this was sort of a quick start to the campaign. And it's important that people have a fully informed opportunity to make the decision in November regarding who they'd like to see represent the state of Alaska. And I'm excited to be in this race. I'm excited to be in this race going in hopefully in November. And I look forward to the opportunity to meet you in your community where you are.
All right, thank you. Now, among the three of you, what makes each of you the most qualified to be the single congressional vote representing Alaskans in Washington, D.C.? We'll begin with Nick Begich, followed by Mary Peltola and Sarah Palin. Mr. Begich.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, I do come from the private side, and I think as we talk about the state, we often talk about its potential as a resource base, not just for Alaskans, but really for the nation and the world. And when we talk about that, we tend to put people into office that come from a career in government, perhaps they're career politicians, and I think it's important for us as we think about the portfolio of ambassadorship. Who are our ambassadors? They're the governor, our two senators, and our House member. They tell Alaska's story to the nation and to the world. And I think it's important that at least one of those voices come to the table with some substantive private sector experience. And I'd like to be that voice for that reason. I think that is a distinguishing characteristic. I'm 44 years old, God willing, and I'm knocking on wood here in the studio. I've got some runway in front of me, and I can help to rebuild some of the seniority that we lost when Don Young passed. We know that's important to the state of Alaska. As one voice out of 435 people in the House, we've got to be able to rebuild that clout, rebuild that seniority, rebuild that time in the seat so that we have a voice at the table ready to make Alaska's case to the nation.
Thank you, Mr. Begich. Mary Peltola.
Thank you, Rick. I was born and raised in Alaska. I have a vested interest in Alaska with my whole team of kids and my growing number of grandkids. I'm not going anywhere. I think one of the things that helps me be a good representative is I'm not a millionaire. I am just like every other regular Alaskan. And I understand the economic struggles that Alaskans face firsthand. My priorities are the priorities of everyday Alaskans. I grew up commercial fishing, like I mentioned earlier. I have served in public service for many years. I did 10 years representing Bethel and Dillingham, and then Bethel in the state legislature. I've served on my local city council. I have served my tribe. I've worked in the private sector. I worked for 6 years for Donlin Gold Company. It's a large industrial gold mine project out on the Kuskokwim. And I've also worked in the nonprofit sector as an executive director of a fish commission. And I just really believe in public service, and I'm very committed to good public policy. That is the reason that I'm attracted to this kind of work, is I think public policy is critical. It's critically important. It's critically important to have folks in office who work well with other people, who are easy to work with, and can build coalitions to really solve our challenges. So that's why I think I'm the most qualified. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Palin.
I want to talk about my connections that I have, not just throughout Alaska, but throughout the United States of America and throughout the world, that can help and be put to good use for Alaska's interests. But before that, I want to kind of differentiate myself from the other candidates by pointing out my record and my 30 years of involvement in Alaskan politics. And that started out PTA, PTO, city council member, city manager, city mayor, a governor, a regulator of oil and gas, and then the nominee for vice president of the United States of America on the Republican ticket. All of the experiences that I have has really, really taught me that government over and over and over again, too often, is the problem, not the solution. Government so rarely ever solves a problem. They create, those who are especially career politicians create so many problems. We need a voice of reason from the people, somebody who is connected to just normal, everyday Joe Sixpack, hardworking Alaskan. And I feel that that is who I am. And I have a track record, I believe, that proves what it is that I'm able to accomplish, again, with some connections that I have throughout the U.S. I know I get kind of slammed for, oh my gosh, you travel across the United States and across the world, and you're always yakking about Alaska. Darn right I am. Alaska it's my heart. Besides family and faith, Alaska is who I am, and I will do everything that I can to continue promoting Alaska by capitalizing in a positive way on these connections that I have. That's why I feel thankful to have the endorsement of President Trump, of so many, we'll talk about the Alaskan endorsements, but so many across the U.S. whom we need to tap into those connections in order to make sure Alaska's interests are met.
Thank you very much.
What is the most common concern you've heard from people in Southeast Alaska over the last month? We'll begin with Sarah Palin, followed by Mary Peltola and Nick Begich. Ms. Palin.
Yeah, cost of transportation. And as we alluded to earlier, I think there was agreement that the cost of everything and inflation is articulated so extremely loud and aggressively by people in Southeast Alaska, understanding that it doesn't have to be this way. There are so many things that we as Alaskans, as hardworking Alaskans, as entrepreneurs, what we can do to bring the costs of goods, of transportation, of everything down. We just need that allowance to be able to do that. That means government, get off our back, get back on our side, and allow the private sector, allow market-driven solutions to come into play in order to address these rising costs of everything. So I hear that across Southeast Alaska especially. But another thing, because I was governor at a time where we were cleaning up some crony capitalism and some corruption within the state when it came to lawmakers having earlier dealt with oil companies and favoritism shown by lawmakers to certain oil companies, I still hear a lot of concern for that crony capitalism to make sure that we are developing our resources and conducting our business as government entities fairly, ethically, morally, and I have a track record there too, proving that nobody's going to buy or sell me. I have none of those special interests clawing on me. And I think I'm in a great position to continue fighting crony capitalism, fighting for the will of the people to make sure that the business conducted by government on a local, a state, a national level is done cleanly, fairly, level playing fields, no favoritism, no corruption.
Thank you, Ms. Palin. Ms. Peltola.
Thank you, Kevin. I hear over and over that the marine highway system is a very pressing need for folks in Southeast Alaska, and we've really seen it dismantled in the last few years. So that's one of the top things. I'm happy to see that in the infrastructure bill, there may be some relief at the federal level for that system. Jobs are a very big deal across Alaska, but that includes Southeast. A lot of our villages, we just need more jobs and people ready to take those jobs. Energy, many communities in Southeast have good energy rates in terms of electricity with the hydro projects. Juneau, Petersburg, Sitka have great hydro projects that help with households' energy rates. But we still have many villages, many communities across Alaska who are paying crippling energy costs. Jody Mitchell at IPEC has 2 shovel-ready, salmon-friendly hydro projects ready to go, one in Hoona and one in Angoon. We're all paying crippling diesel prices to heat our homes, many of us throughout Alaska. I know Juneau's real fortunate because you've got a lot of people on electric heat, but there are still folks on diesel. And our home energy costs are going to be 1.5 to 2 times what they were last year. This is going to really be an impact on all Alaskan homes. So that's definitely one. Dropout rates, we have a crippling dropout rate across our state, and that includes Southeast Alaska. We've got to get more folks at least graduating from high school and then thinking about what they're going to do in 13th grade or, right after high school. So those are some of the issues in Southeast that I've heard about.
Thank you, Ms. Peltola. Mr. Baggage.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground there, but I would say the availability of workforce is a major issue that I hear a lot about, particularly in the last month as we flex, into tourist season. And, it's really amazing to me to see the pervasiveness of this labor shortage, even in communities like Haines, where you would think that there's a relatively contained population there, you're getting labor force pressure even in the smaller communities of Southeast Alaska. And this is a problem, not just here, you see that issue nationally as well, but as tourism resurges in the state of Alaska, we've got to make sure that the people that are visiting our state are having great experiences, that people are having the right kind of experiences, that they tell friends and they come back, because that net promoter score, that idea that they go home and they tell others, that's really important for making sure that we retain and maintain a robust industry here. There are a number of other issues. Mary touched on the matter of the marine highway system. It's not just being able to maintain and have the ferries. It's also making sure that there's regularly scheduled service, that we've got enough frequency in the marine highway system to be able to utilize it in the right way. I know there were a number of families that were trying to get to the Southeast Alaska State Fair here just recently. And, if there had been some better ferry service available between Juneau and Haines, that would be possible. It would also be possible if we had a road to Haines. And I hear over and over again the need for more roads in Southeast Alaska so that we can actually access the rest of our state. And I think that's important as well. And it's something that's a recurring theme every time I come to Southeast Alaska.
Thank you.
Candidates, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, they're all currently financially sound, but risk funding concerns. What would you propose to shore up the country's major safety net programs? We'll begin with Mary Peltola, followed by Nick Begich and Sarah Palin.
I am really glad you asked this question. Social Security, as we know it, if we keep on the same trajectory, will be ending in 12 years. And in 12 years, the interest on the principal and taxes will no longer cover the cost of payments to older Americans, and we cannot allow this to happen. We've got to remove the cap on taxable income so that higher earners pay the same ratio on their income to Social Security taxes as lower and middle income Americans. Another way we can drive down the cost of healthcare is to allow the government to negotiate the cost of prescription drugs. And this is one of the things I mentioned earlier in the Inflation Reduction Act. It allows Medicare to negotiate prices for certain pharmaceutical drugs and restricts future price increases while capping out-of-pocket expenses for seniors at $2,000, which I mentioned before. We've got to lower prices now and deliver for Alaskans. There are some on the extremes that want to sunset Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. We have been paying into Social Security all of our lives. Generations of us have come to count on this, and I will fight very hard to protect these vital programs and won't let anyone take them away if I'm elected.
Thank you. Nick Begich.
Well, I think I would challenge the assumption that these programs are financially sound today. And the reason I would challenge that is because in order to be financially sound, the balance sheet has to be sufficient to pay future obligations. And what we see right now is that current payees into these systems are paying for benefits of those who are receiving those benefits. And so we do not have a sufficient endowment necessary to cover all the future obligations of Social Security and Medicare. I think that it is helpful that we can now hopefully negotiate these drug prices down for Medicare, but there's a lot that goes into Medicare. And in fact, if you talk to providers, in many cases, they're not able to make a profit providing services to Medicare patient populations. And what's frustrating for many people who are on Medicare is that they're not able to access the doctors that they'd like to access as a result of that. And so I think we've got to pursue some structural reforms. When you look at specifically at Social Security, all of the fund is invested in Treasury bills. And Treasury bills have some of the lowest yields of any financial instrument. They're the equivalent of what's called the risk-free rate. And as a result, right now, they don't even keep up with inflation. So we need to diversify the Social Security Trust Fund, stop using it as a way to continue to deficit spend in our nation, and really put that money away and to work for the people who have paid into those systems so that they have a proper return and we restore solvency to Social Security.
Thank you. Ms. Palin.
Yeah, I beg to differ that Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that these are currently financially sound. I do not believe they are. I think there's a lot of risk when we're talking about the future obligations that we have got to pay out. Because I echo Mary's passion with her commitment to not let anybody touch what our parents, our grandparents have paid into for years and years into Social Security. I will not let government touch those pensions, the Social Security funds. What we're doing today, the federal government is borrowing against Social Security, and this isn't right. And I think too many citizens aren't aware. They're not being told what's actually going on with those funds as we are borrowing from Social Security. We need to reform Medicaid to serve really those who truly require the support. And we need to stop using Medicare to fund some of the government programs that instead a reformation of healthcare with free market solutions could be a better bet for Americans. It goes to a bigger picture here, though, a bigger problem, and that is the debt and deficit spending that Congress, those who hold the purse strings, are so used to that, they're just hoping that citizens of America, that we forget that we're 23, 25, 33, 50, however many trillions of dollars in debt. And if we continue going down the road that we are going, we will not be sovereign. We will not be solvent. And I think we need to start talking more about that spending of our federal government that will create this indebtedness of America to other countries that will own us if we continue going down this road.
Thank you very much.
Candidates, is ranked choice voting good for Alaska? And how much impact do you think ranked choice voting has on your chance of being elected? We'll begin with Nick Begich, followed by Sarah Palin, and then Mary Peltola. Mr. Begich, you have 2 minutes.
So I was not a fan of ranked choice voting. Personally, I did not vote in favor of it. It's the system that we have. Alaskans, by a margin of about 1.05%, approved the ballot measure. There's a lot of talk out there about whether it was the dark money provisions of that ballot measure that sort of pushed it over the edge. But we've got to operate in the world that we live in, and so in terms of its impact on this race, I think what it does is it actually eliminates the true primary. And what we see right now is we're effectively running a primary and a general at the same time. And I think that creates some counterproductivity. It prevents the voter from being able to parse through policy positions readily. I think that, we're running a national experiment here in Alaska as a result of this outside money. About $10 million came into the state of Alaska as a part of this ballot measure initiative. And interestingly enough, it was predominantly dark money that funded it. And it's sort of hypocritical of those who sponsored the initiative in the first place to use dark money themselves to push an initiative that they couldn't easily push in, say, California or New York, because the reality is Alaska is a lot less expensive to get one of these ballot measures through. And there was an effort stood up to inform the public about the challenges, specifically with the ranked choice voting provisions of this. I know the Alaska Policy Forum worked very hard to educate the public. Well, we're going to run this experiment. We'll see how it goes. But, I'd like to see us return to the previous system myself.
Thank you, Mr. Baggage. Ms. Palin.
Yeah, ranked choice voting is the law of the land right now, and it needs to be changed. It is just unfortunately creating such a great deal of voter confusion on how this process works, on whether votes can be trusted to be counted accurately, fairly, as we're going to, slide ballots through a machine. No more hand counting, which doesn't make any sense to me, especially in tiny little rural areas of Alaska where, you'd think hand counting is the best way to ensure, fair counting of an election instead of sticking them through a Dominion computer machine. But the ranked choice voting, it's I already talked earlier about the negative impacts and about my concerns about it. Going forward, though, I want to focus on what the solution is. And the solution is for our lawmakers to start understanding the negative ramifications that can come from ranked choice voting. Remember the intention, so many understand, is for this type of system to split votes so that, believe it or not, a lesser popular candidate that perhaps isn't even going to do the will of the people could actually slip on in there and be the representative of Alaska. That's unfortunate. We did talk about the strange dynamics in this election anyway. I mean, I was watching a rehash of a congressional vote the other night thinking, Alaska is going to go, 8 months without having representation in the United States Congress? That's tragic. That's scary. It's dangerous for Alaska. There has got to be a better way to do this, you guys. And it's up to our lawmakers to get in there, figure out how to do it, and ensure that fairness that the people need to be able to count on with our elections, and so that Alaska has some representation.
Thank you, Ms. Palin. Ms. Peltola.
I am very hopeful about the outcome of ranked choice voting. And I'm hopeful because I am not a very partisan person. And I think that primaries really promote getting people on the very far ends of the pendulum. And then what we have is a body of legislators who can't get to the table, and they are really far apart on negotiating certain issues. So I think that the majority of Alaskans are not platform type partisan people. I think the majority of Alaskans are nonpartisan and undeclared. And even the people who belong to parties, we don't see that, they're not going down and agreeing with every single thing on the platform. Many people in rural Alaska don't necessarily feel like they fit in either party because we have such unique circumstances. But what I'm really hopeful for is that more moderate people will be elected. And I'm really hopeful that voters will feel like they can vote their heart and not feel pressured to vote for the candidate that they think is most quote unquote viable. And my hope is that we shy away from the really extreme type candidates and politicians. And so I am hopeful about ranked choice voting.
Thank you, Ms. Peltola. We'll be back after this brief message.
A special News of the North presentation. The Congressional Candidates Forum with Nick Begich, Sarah Palin, and Mary Peltola from the capital of Alaska on KINY Juneau, KIFW Sitka, and KTKN Ketchikan, and Southern Southeast Alaska. Thanks to the Juneau and Sitka Chambers of Commerce with News of the North's Kevin Allen and Greg Knight.
Thanks to the Greater Juneau Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Sitka Chamber of Commerce, and Southeast Conference.
And welcome back. to our election 2022 congressional forum. I'm Greg Knight. Candidates, we will now ask you a series of questions on policy and specific questions on how you view issues important to Alaskans. We'll rotate the answers at before. Candidates, are you ready?
Ready.
Yes.
All right.
The nation is gripped right now in what may feel like to some a recession, with higher prices on everything, especially gas. What would your first order of business be to help address this issue in Washington, D.C. on behalf of Alaskans? Ms. Palin, you go first.
We are in a recession, and there are formulas that prove that. And I think the mainstream media nationally, at least, is finally, it seems like in the last couple of days, is finally recognizing and acknowledging, yeah, we are in a recession. Whether our president wants to acknowledge it or not, perhaps he doesn't know what the definition is. Again, we need to develop our natural resources, God-given, because here in America, especially in Alaska, where the true conservationists live, we can do it right, ethically, responsibly, cleanly, instead of going overseas and begging Saudi Arabia and these other countries to drill over there and to allow us to import their sources of energy. Those are dirty, dangerous sources of energy. We have the ability, we have the technology, we have the workforce to do it right, to do it cleanly. So it's making no sense what's going on today. All these failures of the Biden administration that are contributing to the recession, to the inflation that we see today, in addition to Congress screwing up by allowing the deficit and the debt to grow and grow and grow, and then engaging in the quantitative easing, printing money out of thin air where soon our currency is not going to be worth a whole lot, and raising that fake debt ceiling every year without even much discussion anymore. Yeah, all these things contributing to a recession. And there are solutions. We just need the right representation, those who have common sense and private sector experience to be in there representing the will of the people, because I guarantee you the people do not like what's going on today.
Thank you, Ms. Palin. Mr. Baggage, you're next.
Yeah, so we are in a recession. The classic definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of year-over-year negative GDP growth, and we've done that in the first quarter and the second quarter of this year. When you look at the Atlanta Fed's nowcasting report, GDP Now, they show that the third quarter is projected to also be negative. And so, at some point, you just got to admit the truth. We're in a recession. Now, the question is, what do we do about it? How do we get here? What are the interventions that we need to take? So first off, we got here in this particular recession because of government intervention. Shutdowns throughout the United States, loose monetary and fiscal policy, in other words, money printing by the Fed to accommodate a Treasury and a Congress that was more than willing to experiment with what we used to call universal basic income. And the stimulus that was used was sent out to everybody. And that hot money shot through the economy as the economy started to recover. And we saw a tremendous competition for a limited supply of goods and services with all that cash. And so the money supply needs to be reduced. That's something that the Fed can do. That's something that Fed is working on through their levers of interest rates and now quantitative tightening on their balance sheet. They've got a $9 trillion balance sheet that they've grown during this period of time. So those are some immediate actions that can be taken, but the long-term action has to be fiscal discipline. We've got to put government back in its lane, allow the private sector to flourish. We've got to return production to the United States to the extent that we can. And that's how you build an economy. That's how you build a real economy, through production, through productivity and labor participation. And that's going to be what pulls us out of this recession ultimately.
Thank you, Mr. Baggage. Ms. Peltola.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about this, and I don't think there's anything more important to talk about because this is affecting every single household in Alaska. I mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, and of course, this has a long way to go to become law, but it has worked to negotiate prices. It has written in it to negotiate prices for certain pharmaceutical drugs. I talked about that. Another really important provision in it is it introduces a minimum tax that prevents the biggest corporations from evading their taxes and making sure they pay their fair share of their record profits. By lowering healthcare costs and reducing the deficits, it really helps us fight inflation and lower prices for ordinary Alaskans. Another piece of this, yeah, we have overheated the economy to some degree. I will agree with that. But the other piece is the logistics supply chain and the demand being a lot higher than the supply, the chips, the computer chips that are needed to make everything, including cars, I think is one of the facets that we need to, and there is traction on that as well. But I think helping with the Port of Alaska, helping with the marine highway system, those and helping drive down the costs of transportation, that will ultimately help every household in Alaska.
Thank you, Ms. Peltola.
Yep.
Sorry, excuse me, my bad. If elected, what is your top economic priorities to support businesses in Southeast Alaska? We'll begin with Mary Peltola, followed by Sarah Palin and Nick Begich. Ms. Peltola.
Cheaper energy. Energy is just one of those things. It's so ironic that as Alaskans, we pay the highest price for energy across the board. We pay maybe even more than Hawaiians, and we produce energy. It is so ironic, but cheaper energy in terms of electric, again, those shovel-ready projects for communities that definitely need their prices driven down. We need to support the marine highway ferry system. We need to bring more, help the tourist industry, the communities that want tourism in their community. I think it's important that we honor that. Can you repeat the question, Rick?
I can repeat the question.
Yeah.
If elected, what is your top economic priority to support businesses in Southeast Alaska?
Okay. Again, I really think it's energy. It's really hard. And like, for instance, power cost equalization, that's a misnomer of a program, but because it doesn't equalize anything, but it reduces electric costs. But if you're a business, you can't qualify for it. Or even if you have a bed and breakfast in your home, you lose your power cost equalization subsidy. So driving down energy rates, you can't have a real economy if you don't have cheap energy.
Thank you very much. Sarah Palin.
Well, you know what's good for one part of Alaska is good for all Alaskans. And I think we, more than any other state, we can consider ourselves one big, big family. So when I talk about energy independence and energy development responsibly, ethically, I'm talking about all over the state, but how it positively impacts the businesses here in Southeast. We've got to open ANWR. We've got to develop our coal, our gas, our oil production to the fullest extent possible. We need to reopen our fertilizer plants using natural gas. All those things that we're capable of doing better than any other state, I would say, certainly better than any other country. All of that is going to be good for costs here in Southeast Alaska, for transportation issues that are being dealt with here. But when we talk about timber, and we haven't talked really about timber and how it's done so responsibly here in Alaska, and when we talk about tourism, which quite honestly, people down in the States certainly look at Juneau especially as being such a tourist mecca. And I think Juneau and all Southeast residents should be proud of that, because the hospitality here is absolutely unsurpassed. We need to talk about what the positive impacts are when we can reduce the costs of energy and transportation, and how every business will be able to be transformed in a positive way if we just get a handle on this. And again, Alaskans are the ones that are able to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Begich.
Yeah, I think it goes back to a point that we touched on earlier in the forum, and that is diversifying Southeast Alaska's economy. And, unfortunately, the timber industry in Southeast was decimated under the Roadless rule that Bill Clinton put into effect, Trump repealed, and then Biden reinstated. And, I think it goes back to sort of an ideological war on resources, domestic resources. And you see this out of the Biden administration. You see it from Secretary Deb Haaland, who has taken ANWR off the table again, taken ConocoPhillips Willow project off the table, taken the Ambler Mining District Road off the table, taken the Tongass off the table again, taken leases in NPRA off the table. There's no other way to describe it. These folks are adamantly opposed to resource development in Alaska. Well, one of the things that's really fascinating, particularly here in Juneau, the biggest private sector employer, mining. And Southeast Alaska is blessed with incredible mineral resources that are extracted responsibly. It's done so well down here. And we've got rare earth opportunities. We've got Constantine's project out in Haines at the Palmer VMS. There's so many opportunities for base metals, rare earths, critical minerals, and precious metals here in Southeast Alaska. I think that is a tremendous opportunity. And in order to make that possible, we've got to get government out of the way. We've got to reduce regulation. And I think, tackling that is a top priority for Southeast Alaska's economy.
Thank you.
On to the next question. What is your view on the Tongass roadless rule? We'll start with Nick Begich, followed by Mary Peltola, and then Sarah Palin. Mr. Begich.
Well, it needs to be repealed. And, we know that we have tremendous capacity for forestry and timber here in Southeast Alaska. We're blessed with a tremendous amount of resources in the state. And, putting these on a rotational lease program and getting the timber industry kicked back off in Southeast Alaska would be a top priority for me. One of the other aspects of repealing the roadless rule is that it does open up some really incredible world-class mineral prospects in Southeast Alaska that can really help to solve a number of the challenges that we face as a nation. We are so reliant on China and other nations, adversaries around the world, for the supply of the minerals that we need for the cars we drive, the computers we use, the products we rely on a daily basis. We need to return as much of that manufacturing to the United States, and it starts with sourcing those raw materials here in the United States, processing them, and then moving through a domestic, vertically integrated supply chain so that we have security over those things that we need most in this country.
Ms. Palin, the question is, what is your view on the Tongass roadless rule?
Oh, I believe it needs to be repealed also. The vast, beautiful, rich wilderness that we call Alaska. And here we're sitting here in the Alaska studio, the Alaska Airlines studio, and we're looking out at forest. And it just reminds me how blessed we absolutely are. But we're not going to be able to access any of this. The people cannot enjoy it. They cannot conduct proper forest management unless we have the road infrastructure to support that. Nick talked about the minerals also, those things that we need to be able to access. Look at copper, cobalt, where an increase by 500% is projected in the next 10 years. What are Alaskans going to do about this if we cannot access our own resources that are out this? No, we need that road infrastructure. And that reminds me, too, of what Biden's trying to pull with his 30 by 30 plan. By 2030, he wants 30% of federal lands all locked up to any kind of development. That means residential development, community development, natural resource development. We need to fight things like Biden's 30 by 30 plan, and we need to, yes, undo that roadless rule that negatively impacts our great state.
Ms. Peltola.
Thank you, Kevin. I am fiercely committed to local control over any project that impacts Alaskans. I do not necessarily think that the federal government should be funding private roads for industrial timber companies that would be private roads. We need sustainable solutions. We've got to make sure we look at the competing principles of environmental protections, economic opportunities for local people, protecting salmon streams, preserving old growth trees that are a pivotal and critical part of our ecosystem in Southeast Alaska. We've got to move toward renewable energy resources. And I really am in support and applaud the diverse stakeholders on the Tongass Advisory Committee who are working towards development that improves the socioeconomic opportunities in the Southeast region and maintains our collective Alaskan way of life.
Thank you, Ms. Peltola.
And we'll be right back right after this quick break.
This is the Congressional Candidates Forum from Alaska's capital. Thanks to the KINY and Sitka Chambers of Commerce, with News of the North's Kevin Allen and Greg Knight, and the candidates Nick Begich, Sarah Palin, and Mary Peltola.
Thanks to the Greater Juneau Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Sitka Chamber of Commerce, and Southeast Conference.
Thank you, candidates. We now move to closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their remarks. We'll begin in the reverse order of introductions. We'll begin with Mary Peltola, followed by Sarah Palin, and then Nick Begich. Ms. Peltola, your closing remarks.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. And I really appreciate this forum. I think in Alaska, we've got 6 states within our state, and Southeast is certainly its own unique region of our state, and it's got its own unique challenges and opportunities. And I have a very long history of being in Southeast Alaska. 2 of my kids are Tlingit. We belong to the Quashkekwan clan out of Yakutat. And I just have a lot of relationships with folks down here in Southeast over the years. My daughter's going to be going to school at Mount Edgecombe this year. She'll be in 9th grade. My son will be in 11th grade at JDHS. So my heart is definitely here in Southeast with my 2 youngest kids. Again, I'm Mary Peltola. I'm pro-fish, pro-family, pro-jobs, and pro-choice. I am born and raised in Alaska. I've got a vested interest in Alaska. I think we have a very diverse population here. We all come from very different backgrounds, but we definitely have a common future. And it's in all of our best interests to work together and go beyond partisanship and divisiveness and regionalism, and really just embrace each other and work together to work through our challenges, because we certainly have enough of them. And we've got some real formidable enemies who have been out there for years and years in terms of international policies. I'm very concerned about the relationship between Russia and Iran right now and their nuclear developments. And the upshot of that is I do not see any American as my enemy. I really believe in working together and being partners and developing partnerships with everyone and anyone who is an American. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peltola. Ms. Palin, your closing statement, please.
Again, I want to thank you so much for this forum. You guys actually, a forum like this actually makes campaigning fun. And a lot of people, I'm sure, comment to the other candidates too about, oh my goodness, this assumption is so grueling and it's so tough. And it is. However, when you have opportunity like this to get to connect with the people, especially here in Southeast, through these radio waves, it makes everything worthwhile. And it's actually fun. And life is too short to be grumpy and mean and negative and so obsessively partisan, for one, that they let partisanship get in the way of just doing what's right for the people of Alaska. So I really appreciate this opportunity. And I will put to good use the connections that I have throughout Alaska, throughout the nation, throughout the world, to make sure that Alaska's interests are met. I appreciate the endorsements that I have by the NRA, Right to Life, unique groups like Bikers Across America and Bikers for Trump, those who represent just freedom-loving, hard-working people who want the best for one another, for our families, for our communities, for our great nation. Because in some respects, you guys, it's now or never for America. We have to start making better decisions on a federal level. Our federal government has got to protect the rights of individuals and quit taking away our rights, because there's no alternative than America. There's nowhere else to go. America is that beacon on a hill. We are that bright light that other nations look to as a country that could and should be emulated. People should be able to look at America and see what's done right. Well, we're losing our way. And it's so important that we get back to our foundation. We get back to constitutional, common sense conservatism and save this country. And that's what I intend to do as your Congresswoman.
Thank you, Ms. Palin. Mr. Begich.
Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to speak today. You know, this is a wonderful forum and venue to reach you. You know, we endeavor to meet you where you are. I've traveled, as I mentioned, to Haines multiple times, Sitka multiple times, Juneau half a dozen, maybe a dozen times in the last 2 years. I've been taking the campaign to meet you where you are. We're excited about the opportunity. I'm excited about the opportunity to represent you in Congress. I believe that there's so much latent potential in Southeast Alaska that has yet to be unlocked. And, that's the kind of potential that, again, it's not just good for us. It's good for the generations to come. One of the things that I hear over and over again as I travel the state from parents is that they're worried that there's not opportunities in the state of Alaska for their kids and their grandkids. I want to make sure that we have those opportunities, that we do meet the promise of North to the Future, of America's last frontier. I want to make sure that we can deliver on that promise to our kids and grandkids. I believe in order to do that, we've got to make that business case for the state. We've got to be able to be a strong voice in the House, that one voice of 435 people saying, look, Alaska has a lot to offer. Alaska can help to solve so many of our nation's challenges. I want to be that voice for you down in the House. As someone who's supported by over 70 publicly elected officials, current and former party leaders, I'm proud to have the support of Alaskans. I think that our campaign will continue to be grassroots all the way through November. We're excited to meet you. Come to one of our events. Come talk to me. I'm looking forward to meeting you, hearing from you about your issues, your opportunities, and the solutions that you believe we can bring to the table.
Thank you, candidates. That concludes our News of the North Special Election 2022 Candidate Forum featuring Nick Begich, Sarah Palin, and Mary Peltola. This forum will encore at 5:05 p.m. on KINY and KINYradio.com today, with an encore on KJNO in Juneau on Saturday at noon.
We will also post a podcast version of this forum on our website, KINYradio.com. Thank you all for listening. And thank you again to our sponsors, the Greater Juneau Chamber of Commerce, the Sitka Chamber of Commerce, and Southeast Conference. Again, thank you for listening and have a great day.
This has been a special News of the North presentation. A podcast of this program will be available for download at KINYradio.com under On Demand, and made possible thanks to the Juneau and Sitka Chambers of Commerce.
Thanks to the Greater Juneau Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Sitka Chamber of Commerce, and Southeast Conference.
From the Don't miss a thing on KINY Juneau, 894.9 FM.
From ABC News, I'm Daria Albinger. Firefighters are